'79, one of their greats from that team, Dave Parker, going into the Baseball Hall of Fame. We find out today one of the Guardians/Indians greats of all time going into the Baseball Hall of Fame. That, of course, would be Tom Hamilton, the legendary radio voice of the Cleveland Guardians. And the baseball winter meetings are continuing in Dallas, Texas, and the Guardians and the Pirates and the Blue Jays with a menage trade yesterday. And to talk about who the Guardians got back in that trade from the Pittsburgh Pirates, we go to the hotline right now and check in with Pirates beat reporter for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and former employee here at WHBC, Noah Hiles, joining us from Dallas, Texas. How are you, Noah?
Kenny, it's great to be on, man. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm outstanding, and thank you for reaching out to me this morning. I'm glad you did because I know nothing about Josh Hartle, Michael Kennedy, and Luis Ortiz. Those are the three pitchers that the Guardians got from the Pirates in return for first baseman, second baseman Spencer Horwitz, who they got from the Toronto Blue Jays, so that's the menage a trade. So fill me in on the three pitchers that the Guardians got in this trade.
I'll start with the minor league guys first. Michael Kennedy was a prospect I really liked, the top 20 guy in the Pirates system. Young guy, kind of a Greg Maddux style pitcher. He pitches. He doesn't throw the ball, has good stuff, really good command. He's going to take some years to develop. He's still at the low levels of the minor leagues, but I think he can be a major league starter one day. And Cleveland typically does well at developing guys with his skill set. Hartle's an interesting project for Cleveland. He was a guy that entering last college baseball season was projected to be a top 10 pick, and he performed very poorly, and he fell out of the first round, fell all the way down to the third round, where I believe the third round, where the Pirates took him, took a flyer on just because he, at one point in time, had all this talent, but his production fell off with no injury or really anything to point at. Only pitched once in the minors last season, so it'll be an interesting project for Cleveland. I think he was just a nice little throw-in piece. But the main ship of this trade for Cleveland is Luis Ortiz, a guy who I was really impressed with this past year for Pittsburgh. I would say probably their best development success of the 2024 season. This was a guy who a couple of years ago, there was an analyst the Pirates hired to skim the entire minor league system and find some hidden gems. And he went back to the front office and said, one of the most talented pitchers that no one knows about in your organization is a kid named Luis Ortiz. He quickly became a high-rated prospect. He threw very hard. The work ethic wasn't necessarily there. He struggled a little bit in the beginning of his big league career. But things changed this past year, I should say, when out of spring training, they put him in the bullpen rather than the starting rotation. And he got to work alongside of Roda Chapman, who became kind of a mentor to him. And they used him in a different way. For the beginning of the season, he was a mid-leverage guy to a long reliever, and then a starting rotation spot opened in June, and he took off and ran with it. He finished the year as probably their second most productive starter behind Skeens. I think this is probably the best starting pitcher on Cleveland's roster right now. I think you guys got a really good, young, controllable arm, and I'm excited to see what the Indians pitching group can do to develop him even further.
Coming up in January, his birthday's a day before mine. He'll be 26 in January, so still very young. And I'm guessing, is he still on that favorable rookie contract or arbitration-eligible contract so they control him for years?
He's got 2 more years before he even hits arbitration. This is a very affordable player who I think can be used in a lot of different ways. If they want to make him kind of a weapon out of the bullpen, he has familiarity doing that, but I think Cleveland needs starting pitching. And this is a guy who, like I said, was a solid starting pitcher. A really cool thing that my big takeaway with Ortiz this past season, he learned to pitch in the middle of the year. He had never thrown a cutter before, saw Mitch Keller, a Pirates All-Star starter, and asked him how he throws it. He learned it mid-season, and it ended up being one of his best pitches that he throws now. So he learns on the fly, and for a guy with that much raw talent to come to an organization like Cleveland who's coachable, I think that he can do a lot of stuff. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being an all-star before it's all said and done in Cleveland.
I hope so, because, a lot of Guardians fans are looking here. They go again, the Dolans, cheap. They trade a player they signed to a big-time deal, and he wins 3 Gold Gloves and is a decent hitter, 260, let's say, 13 homers, 60 RBIs a year, and they're getting rid of him coming off the ALCS. So I think the reason for that was twofold, because they did want to get out from underneath that contract and maybe give that money to Stephen Kwan, who might be more deserving of it, but also because they needed the pitching help. And so they get 3 starting pitchers, at least from what you're telling me, Noah Hiles, and one that is major league ready this year, right? You wouldn't be surprised if he was the number 3 or 4 starter for the Guardians this year?
I think he'll be higher than that. I think he'll be number 2. I think if Cleveland hosts a playoff series, Luis Ortiz will be starting in one of the home games. I think that highly of him. I think he's a really capable starting pitcher, and especially looking at that was Cleveland's weakness this past year. And I know some moves have been made and everything, but I really have high expectations for this guy in Cleveland.
For his career in, you look at the record in ERA, 12-13 at the major league level, 3.93 ERA, but this year was 7-6, and that earned run average was down around 3. And did you see him? Numbers can tell some of the story, Noah, okay, but not all of the story. Could you see him growing as a pitcher in handling starts better when he didn't have his good stuff, or being able to go deep into a game when maybe the calls weren't going his way, or, he was stranding runners but able to give the Pirates innings?
Yes, I'll give a perfect example of that. They first moved him into the rotation, he was lights out for like 3 or 4 starts. I think he only allowed like 2 earned runs in those first 4 starts of the year he made. But then he started facing teams for a second time, and they started getting, a little bit better. The game fights back, as we see with every pitcher. And there's one start that stands out especially. He was going against the Diamondbacks in a big game late in July for the Pirates, and he allowed, I think, 4 home runs in the first 5 batters, against the first 5 batters he faced. And this was in a stretch where I don't think the Pirates had an off day in like 2 weeks, and their bullpen was already kind of taxed. And he battled back to pitch like another 5 innings after that. Normally when you see a guy get roughed up that bad in the first inning, they're out by the second. But for him to, recover and not allow any more damage and get to the 6th inning, I think that's the sign of, a young pitcher growing up and being mature and being able to weather the storm and keep your team in the game. And the Pirates went on to tie that game. Their bullpen blew it later on, as was the case for a lot of games last year. But that's what you want when a guy doesn't have his best stuff and, things don't go according to plan in the beginning of a game. Can you keep your team in it? Can you keep your bullpen from having to cover 7 innings? And Luis Ortiz has done a really good job at that since getting a second shot at being a starting pitcher.
Happy to have with us the Pirates beat reporter for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, former WHBC teammate of ours, Noah Hiles. He's in Dallas, Texas, where the winter meetings are being held. And Noah, I'm looking at his numbers, I guess, 6'2", 240. Any concerns about weight with him, or no? Is he pretty solid?
He's a big boy. I'll say that. I think he's slimmed down a little bit in recent years. And it's interesting, that kind of plays into his skill set, too. Earlier in his career, this was a guy who would, flash a fastball that could hit triple digits. And I think as he matured a little bit and spent more time in the major leagues, he learned that you don't have to throw it 100, that if you can command the strike zone and place it where it needs to be, you could take a little bit off of it. And that actually made him a better pitcher. So I think, focus and preparation, those were things that he struggled with in the early days of his career. But I think that being around capable, and I think the Latin element of it too, with Chapman being around a guy who speaks his language and he grew up watching play, he was able to connect and really get a solid idea of what it takes to prepare your mind and body to do this for 162 games. And I think he's taking that with him to Cleveland.
That pitcher he's talking about is Luis Ortiz, right-handed pitcher that the Guardians got along with 2 minor leaguers in the trade for Spencer Horwitz. Why did the Buccos want Spencer Horwitz?
Well, Pittsburgh has had a revolving door at first base since Josh Bell left town, and that's before I even worked for you guys. So it's been a little bit of time. But I think Horwitz is a guy that has a lot of Pirates connections. Ben Cherington drafted him when he used to be an employee of the Blue Jays front office. And then, of course, he left Toronto to run Pittsburgh's organization. So there's the familiarity there. There are other guys in the front office who worked with Cherington in Toronto who are familiar with Horowitz's game. And then the Pirates hitting coach that was just hired a couple months ago, Matt Haig, coached Horwitz in AA, AAA, and at the major league level. So there was a lot of familiarity with this player. They're always looking to find affordable offense, as you kind of alluded to. I mean, you talk about the Guardians and their finances. The Pirates are even more extreme in that front. And so finding a guy with a lot of major league control, years before arbitration, and a lot of untapped potential, someone who's potentially kind of hidden or blocked log jams in the minor leagues because there was a great first baseman ahead of him in the major league level with Vlad Jr. This was a move that I think the Pirates had been waiting to make for a little bit now, and they finally were able to piece something together.
Yeah, the Pirates front office and ownership group make the Dolans look like Jeff Bezos and how much money they spend. So, I grew up there, and everybody I talk to back there that are just fans and not media members like us are just so frustrated and embarrassed by the ownership there with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Is that a fair assessment on my part for my friends?
Yes, Kenny, I'll give you a stat that goes along that kind of represents the frustration. The last multi-year contract the Pirates had given to a major league free agent was Daniel Hudson in 2017. He's won 2 World Series championships with 2 different teams since signing that contract with the Pirates. They've had more players permanently banned from the game of baseball under this current regime than they've had sign a multi-year extension or a multi-year contract as a free agent. It's just been a lot of penny pinching and careful spending here on the North Shore.
All right, so how many more years then do Pirates fans get to see Paul Skeens before he leaves?
I think 3.
Okay.
I think he'll get to 1 year of arbitration. But I mean, the way things are trending right now, I mean, this is a guy who, he was out of their price range the moment he stepped on a diamond in the minor leagues when people saw how he would pitch against, major league talent. And B, I think, this, just looking at it, this is a player that if you trade him, you could change your whole organization. You look at what the Nationals are building now from trading Soto all these years ago, and you see the stars that they've acquired from that. I mean, Skeens is going to get more than the Soto return a couple of years ago, I think, because you could trade what will probably be the game's best pitcher by the time he's dealt with years of affordable control. It's not something Pirates fans want to hear. It's not something baseball fans should really want to hear. You should want to be, in a spot where you can maybe maintain a superstar you drafted first overall. But the reality is, Pittsburghers know it. They know that you only have this guy pitching in a uniform for 3, maybe 4 more seasons at best. And that's their window, because a guy like that in October would be electric. It's almost an automatic win in the hardest time of the year to win games. They just got to get him there.
He is very special, was the Rookie of the Year. My sister sent me a Paul Skeens jersey, obviously popular, and, the most powerful couple in all of sports, right? Livy Dunn and Paul Skeens. How crazy was that covering the power couple?
It's one of the cool things you can experience when you get into this industry. You got to cover LeBron when he was young, and it's something similar to that, where this guy, we knew about him his senior year at LSU when he was just dominating. I think social media allows a player like that to gain some traction. And then when you happen to date one of the most, well-known influencers / college athletes out there, that builds your brand. So he was well-known beforehand. And then the way he just dominates, it's easy for people to want to tune in and watch. And it's fun to see that story unfold in front of you as a sports writer. Knowing what my story was going to be once every 5 days heading to the ballpark made my job easier. People wanted to read about this big guy with a mustache who threw 1,000,000 miles an hour. And every time I would show up, I was kind of waiting for him to get humbled a little bit because I hadn't seen it. I watched every start he made, including his AAA debut. I drove down to Louisville to watch it on Easter weekend last year. And I remember watching that thinking, this is the best pitcher I've seen in person, just with the way he commands his own. And I've been waiting for him to have a bad start, and there hasn't been one yet, Kenny. So it's been a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, enjoy it while it lasts, as you pointed out, Noah. And we'll see, if they trade him sooner rather than later, if they try and hold on to him to make some money, or maybe ownership will sell. Who knows what might happen in the future for the Pirates. I'm hoping ownership sells and somebody gets in there and will finally take this team back to where the Buccos were in the 70s when I was growing up as a kid, winning 2 World Series in 10 years and having dominant players again. So it makes me, as a Guardians fan as well, even though on a day where you look like you trade Andres Jimenez because of money, it makes me feel better that it's not a Pirate situation, that I get the cover here. So, hey, thanks for reaching out this morning. Thanks for coming on there from Dallas, Texas, the home of the winter meetings right now, and we'll see if the Pirates and the Guardians do anything else before it's all said and done, all right?
Yeah, all right, sounds good. I'll be on if they do.
Okay, there is Noah Hiles. Follow him on Twitter at Noah Hiles, Pittsburgh Pirates beat reporter for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and he likes the starting pitcher that is Major League ready that the Guardians got in return in that menage a trade with the Blue Jays and the Pirates in Luis Ortiz. Right-handed starting pitcher, ready to pitch, plug and pitch right now for the Guardians to start the 2025 season. We'll see if that's how the Guardians see him as well. I can't think they wouldn't, or they wouldn't have pulled off a trade like this because they know they need starting pitching help.